moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie. That's amore.
You're listening to Lombard Trucking.
When the world seems to shine like you've had too much wine.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to episode 153 of the Lombard Trucking Show, your favorite freight-focused, fitness-inspired podcast out there. Thank you guys for tuning in, especially thank you guys for tuning in to yesterday's episode. We had a great conversation talking sales and stuff. Got a phenomenal guest today. I'm excited to have him on. Fellow Austin local, too, right here to Central Texas. And I'm excited to have this conversation because watching this company over the past few years, especially using them just for my time using them as an owner operator, booking loads, and then seeing just how much they've really exploded to now, being like the big name sponsor at the Mid-America Truck Show this year has been awesome. And I can't wait to dive into this conversation. So without any further delay, I want to bring on the VP of Corporate Strategy over at Truckstop, Mr. Sean Dehan himself. What's going on, brother?
Hey, Michael. Thanks for having me, man. This is exciting.
Yeah.
Nothing better for me than a little conversation about trucking and fitness. I love the overlapping Venn diagram on that. It's a great kind of spot for me to be talking in.
It's a great place to. It's definitely a great place to be. It's I know you know a little bit about myself. It's definitely the mission, the overall Lombard mission is changing the culture of health and fitness within the industry, and it's great to hear that fitness is a big staple of kind of what you do. You're a runner yourself, which is important. I think it's important, especially being in a leadership role at a company such as Truckstop. I think again, when I spoke at Broker Carrier Summit a year ago, I had talked about how this change needs to come from the top down, from the leaders of the industry. This can't be a ground up thing. And you, as kind of a leader in this space and being it, I think it sets the tone. I think being able to bring you on to more podcasts, doing more content about it is just another grain of sand in the foundation, or another brick of concrete that's in the foundation of really changing that culture.
100%. Yeah. I don't know how people, it's been a part of my life for a long time. So at this point, that's the way to make it happen, right? That's the way you kind of you build the habit. It's almost becomes just second nature to you. I tore my Achilles 6 months ago and was out of commission for 6 months. And if I didn't have my faith, then I probably would have gone like absolutely bananas and just gone totally crazy without being able to run every day. So it's been fun to be back and getting in a couple miles every day as I build back the strength. So, but excited to be talking to you.
Yeah, that's actually a great point to. We always talk a lot in this industry about how trucking is a lifestyle, and especially for a driver, but even for people on brokerage or anybody, any link in the chain, like it's really. There's a lifestyle to it. There's a verbiage. There's a jargon. There's an entire subculture to trucking that is part, it's a part of your lifestyle, and where you find yourself talking about it when you're out to dinner with friends, like it's you come almost eat, sleep and breathe it, and that's what I've done with fitness as well. It's what I did, especially as a driver. Like it became a part of the lifestyle of trucking, where no matter what, off duty or sleeper berth meant like the next lifestyle switch. I'm a big Napoleon guy. Like I compartmentalize.
I see that. Yeah, I like the book appearance in the back.
Yeah, and he's the master of compartmentalizing. And so once you pull that yellow tab and you're off duty or sleeper berth, like immediate shut off, like the miles are done, this is done, boom. It's like you got to go right. It's like now I have this, and you just focus on that. You don't worry about anything else outside of it. You just focus on that. And I think, and really, between Napoleon and again David Goggins, like it really helped just realizing that you just need to shut off, cut off some noise, ignore the distractions, and lock in when it's time to lock in. And when it's time to drive, you drive. When you're not driving, guess what? You should be locking in, so to speak.
Totally. I haven't read a ton of Napoleon, but I'm not surprised to hear that he talked a lot about compartmentalizing. I think it's one of those superpowers that people don't, people want to talk about leadership and they want to understand what it's like to be in a position with, with power or with influence or with lots of responsibility or whatever it may be. And usually it's harder than people think it is. And the people that make it look really easy tend to be very good at compartmentalizing. They can have some absolute, havoc happening at work and in their company, and they can go on stage and talk about the future with clarity and with good personality, despite the fact that they're dealing with something absolutely wild back in the business, right? And so that ability to compartmentalize is so critical in so many phases of life. And if you can bring that into business and then bring it into your personal life, as you've mentioned, I think it's a really powerful tool.
Yeah, he describes it as a cupboard, like the exact quote. He describes it as shutting the drawers of
Yeah.
a cupboard or a dresser. Where if if he was thinking about this, and then when all the cupboards were shut, that's when he slept. Like and there's in the book. I mean, he would be in the middle of a battle, in Europe,
Yeah.
and was simultaneously like investigating like true crime going on back throughout France. Like maybe it was a high murder case,
Yeah.
or he was doing the scheduling of
Fascinating.
what plays should be in the theater district, and it's just 10 minutes, boom, shut the cover. 10 minutes, boom, shut it, and then back to it. It is like he's one of those once in millennium guys for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. My wife will always marvel. My wife marvels at my ability to compartmentalize. I don't know that I'm elite at it or anything like that. I think I'm better than her, because she'll be like, "Have you thought about that thing that we talked about?" I was like, "Oh no, we stopped talking about it." And I, to your point, shut the drawer, moved on, and now you want to talk about it again? Okay, open the drawer. Let's talk about it. Right? It's now time to address it again. So that's pretty cool. I didn't realize Napoleon was involved in so much. Sounds like someone familiar who's like now part of the National Kennedy Center board and is running the board at the Kennedy Center and has got his fingers in everything. Another president that we're familiar with.
Yeah, it's a little, some similarities you can draw there. Yeah, I feel like compartmentalizing or compartmentalization, it's probably like yoga. It's a practice is probably the best way to
Totally.
describe it. But let's dive into this. Your role is, obviously you didn't wake up one day and all of a sudden wound up as VP of corporate strategy at
Yeah.
Truckstop. What's your career been like? Where are you from? Kind of walk us through your resume.
Man, it's a long path. It's a long, winding path. I wish I could say there was a straight line to this thing, and that I got here without a lot of bumps. But I started out as a little bit of an entrepreneur in college. I actually started a company in college and ran it. Graduated a little early to keep running it. I got to a point where in my life though, where I sort of looked at myself and I said, "Do I want to do this the rest of my life?" Because I was at kind of this raise money or kind of find an alternative path out. And I wasn't in love with the business. I wasn't in love with the industry. And so I basically decided that maybe I needed to learn more before I was ready to really kind of scale a business. And, I think there was a little bit of fear there, maybe a little bit of humility, if I give myself some credit, that I didn't know what I didn't know. And I kind of recognized that and needed to learn a little bit more before I was ready to take on a lot of capital from other people. So, I ended up kind of moving into, kind of consulting and advisory type of roles right out of college, and found a great company in the Washington D.C. area and worked there for 6 years. I used that, and I started working inside of that company's corporate strategy department after working as like kind of a consultant or advisor to executives. I mean, I was 22 years old, Michael, and I was advising CFOs that were running $400 million businesses, and I was advising them on strategy and M&A. And I had no business doing that. I was 22 years old. I think I didn't sound like I was 22, which was my greatest gift. We didn't have Zoom videos back then. It was all via phone and teleconference, and so they never saw my face. That was probably pretty fortunate. But the company had great content and great best practices and insights, and my job was just to tell the story around them. So I got pretty experienced in that and pretty good at that. And then moved into corporate strategy, and basically from there, I kind of never looked back. I really just loved being able to look on the horizon. I loved to be able to look at where markets were going, how things were changing, how different companies were interfacing with a market and with an opportunity, and what types of products they were giving their customers, and how that might be even changing how their customers are thinking about your products, and that evolution. And I sort of got bit by that bug and loved it, and really never looked back, and basically have been involved in corporate strategy and corporate development since then. I moved back from DC to Austin to be closer to home. My wife and I started a family 9 years ago now, and I've got 4 kids. So being close to grandparents is really helpful. We can actually go do things in life, and that took me back here. And then right around 22, kind of fast forward a little bit, after doing some strategy and corp dev work, in kind of middle market software companies. That means like software companies that do like $50 million to $200 million in revenue. So fairly large companies, right? I ran across an old colleague of mine named Kendra Tucker, who's the CEO of Truckstop. And she wasn't the CEO at the time, but at the time, Truckstop was sort of looking at what the next horizons would be, what the next types of products and value that they could deliver to their customers would be. And they thought it would be helpful to have someone that sort of spent most of their time thinking about this stuff. And I ran across her, and we sort of reconnected. And then, we used to work together at that company in DC, and it was kind of a special company that had a very special culture and had a lot of really talented people. And most people that work there for any extended period of time really have a lot of fond memories of it. And when you grow up somewhere and you're sort of both forged by the same fire, if you will, right? There's an ability to connect and to trust one another. And so we connected, and ultimately I had the great opportunity to come into trucking. I didn't have a lot of transportation. I didn't have any transportation experience. I had done some supply chain work in previous consulting roles, and so I was aware that trucks moved around the U.S. and transported goods, but certainly not at the level that I am now. And been at Truckstop now for 3 years in this role. And I think, like, for me, I would say I've been bit by the transportation bug. Like, it'd be hard for me to find another industry. There's a lot of great things about this industry. There's a lot of really hard things about this industry. I think it's for everyone, right? Whatever role you're in, whether you're a driver, a broker, a shipper, a vendor, whatever role you might be in, there's really great things about it, and there's really hard things about it. I think the great thing about it, like, is pretty obvious. The people are amazing in the industry, and I think that's what probably keeps you around, Michael, too. I know it's in your family to be in trucking, but I think the people is what keeps you around, and the relationships you can build. And for me too, the other thing that keeps me around is I love solving hard problems. And I love a hard problem. And I don't think there's a much harder problem than transportation when you think about, like, the transportation on a network scale, right? Not at an individual truck scale, but like at the network level. It's an incredibly challenging problem, and one that Truckstop is still trying to figure out, right? We're kind of in an infinite game to continually figure out how transportation evolves, and how we ensure that, one, we're evolving with it, and two, we actually help it evolve, right? That's important for us. So anyways, that's a little bit of my background.
Man, that's awesome. Number one, good takeaway. I mean, right back to Napoleon, right there, being at a young age, like being being an advisor to, kind of C-suite level CEOs and stuff. I mean, it brings me to, like, when he was given his first command over the army of Italy. When you want to talk about solving problems, like, the army of Italy had been losing to the Austrians, total disarray. He comes in and he's talking to veteran officers, like guys who've been hanging around for a while. He's in his 20s, a newer general, and he asked so many questions. He asked so many questions that he got laughed at by every single officer. But he took that army from shoeless, unpaid, no uniforms, to the great, a great victorious army that essentially liberated Italy, because he wanted to solve that problem. And I love that. You're absolutely right when it comes to the industry. Like, there's a lot of good in it, and there's a lot of problems. And the thing is, the problems are solvable, and there's a way to do it. But it is very difficult. I make the comparison to Iron Man. I love Iron Man so much now because it's so hard. And the idea of being able to, and the more I do it, and the better I get, the harder it is going to get to have a perfect race. And that's, like, it will almost never be perfect in a way. And that's what makes me want to go back to Iron Man. I think it's the same thing. Trucking is like, there's a whack-a-mole of problems out there that you deal with, but you rally around a community and people. And that's why I knew, coming off the road, like, there was no way I can detach from this industry. That's why, like, I was working as a driver recruiter. I was like, there is this problem with, we have drivers whose average life expectancy is 61. That's not okay, where there's got to be some change there. And I knew I had to keep myself attached to the industry because of all these people I had met over the years from other drivers and brokers, people we've stirred the pot with on Twitter for so long. We've jumped in Twitter spaces with. It's like, these are people I want to choose to be around, to go adjacent and go into another, like, find some other path or dive into another space, would just be, I feel like, working backwards at that point. So that's awesome how you kind of got, like a lot of people in transportation, you wound up here through somebody you knew. It was kind of a little bit by accident, but a little bit on purpose. And so when it comes to like your role of corporate
Yeah.
strategy, what is your like what's your day-to-day look like in that role? Kind of what does it involve? How are you and with that, because corporate strategy is kind of like a broad term, and
Yeah.
I guess in a sense, when you narrow it down, you obviously talked about evolving with the industry. So evolving with the industry definitely involves a lot of technology
Yeah.
innovation. How are you able to kind of balance that innovation evolving with also just the real world driver needs, so to speak,
Yeah.
if that makes sense?
Yeah. So I mean, just a little about the role, because I think it's one of those like Office Space type roles. Like, I'm the VP of corporate strategy. What exactly do you do here, right? And it's a role that is kind of hard to explain to people, quite frankly, because I get to have my hands in a lot of things, but on balance, what my role is at Truckstop uh, is to help the company look out over a multi-year horizon and see how things are evolving and how Truckstop can evolve to that, right? And that's the simplest and probably least satisfactory answer I can give you. Otherwise, it's going to be, we'd have to talk for 30 minutes just on that. But practically speaking, on a day-to-day basis, my role is to understand the market, to get out and talk to the market, right? Because how can you possibly understand where the market's going and where the industry is going if you're not actually involved in the industry? And ask a ton of questions, right? Like Napoleon. I actually get laughed at a lot of times at Truckstop for asking a lot of questions. They'll say, Sean, okay. The questions, yeah, we're done. No more questions. I actually get that, and that's okay. I'm happy to take it to the end, right? As until you're uncomfortable with me asking questions, I'm happy to get there. But I really want to have a sense for what's the ground truth, what's happening at the foundation. And so I get the great opportunity to work with people like you, people like work with our customers, get to talk to partners, other technology companies, understand what they're doing, understand how maybe they can connect to Truckstop and provide value to our customers in a particular way. And then I get to think about, where does our product need to go from here to better serve our customers as they're evolving. And I think that ties in directly to your kind of second question, which was, how do you evolve, continue to deliver kind of new innovation, new technology, new opportunity, while serving the sort of near-term needs and understanding the realities on the ground for our customers. And I think Truckstop, Truckstop at our core, we are a carrier-focused business, and we call them carriers. It's a little bit of a misnomer. Really, we're a trucker-focused business, right? We are focused on the independent trucker, and we believe that if we serve the independent trucker incredibly well, and if they believe that we are their partner, right, and they trust us to help them build their business, stay in business, stay running, keep their wheels rolling, then we're going to be okay as a company, right? If our customers are okay, we're going to be okay. And so our focus is, how do we help our customers be okay, right? And I think what's so interesting about trucking, in my experience, and this is just a little bit of like my experience in the industry, is that there are all types of truckers out there, right? There isn't a single trucker. There's no such thing as this is the type of trucker that you're talking to. You've got guys that really want to go and make a lot of money. They want to like grow and expand, and they want to get really amazing at their craft, and then they want to kind of replicate that, right? More of a builder from that perspective. Then you got guys who become amazing in their craft, but they don't want the headache of building from beyond where they're at, right? They want to sort of stay and be incredible at their craft, run hard, run often, and make good money, but not push it incredibly hard. And you have guys that might be a little later in their career that are sort of slowing down, but they need, they want to keep it rolling. They love the life on the road. They love the lifestyle, and they want to make money, but they're kind of coming in and out, right? They're working during specific seasons of life or specific seasons of freight, and they're kind of coming in and out. And then you have folks that are going to try to make it in freight, right? They're brand new authorities, and they're trying to make it in freight. And probably they've been running with a Class A license for some period of time, or they've got their CDL and they've been running somewhere, but now they want to make it out on their own. And you've got to kind of design for them a little differently, right? So like each one of those guys, each one of those gals, those truckers, those archetypes, and those aren't the only archetypes, but those examples, you're kind of having to build something a little different for each one of them, because they each require something a little different from you, from as a technology partner, and as someone that's trying to help them run, grow, and build the business that they want to build on the road.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I like how you said that. That's very true. I think that's something that gets generalized a lot. Like when you think of truckers, like they're like trucking, as I said before, is there's an entire subculture to it. I mean, there's CB radio talk, there's this and that, but yeah, you have your company drivers. You do have guys. I mean, I know people who are single truck motor carriers. They've been doing it for 2 decades, and
Yeah.
that's where they're good. They own the truck, they own the trailer, they
Yeah.
provide, they get a good income for their family. Like they're just looking to keep that. The idea of adding trucks, and there's people who've got the gentleman I sold my truck to. He went through that kind of growth. Like he had like 3 or 4 trucks at a certain point.
Yeah.
Ran into had a couple guys. Had 2 guys roll trucks over on their side. So he's had to
Oh,
go
man.
through. So he's grown, found success, but then had a downside. And he's like, hey, I'm good with just the one truck now. He's like, I'm good with just me. I'm
Just
doing
me.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to do this. I'll take care of it. They have full autonomy. And again, like that's a different customer. It's not just like there's a different customer base that what you have. And so it's interesting to hear Truckstop kind of seeing that, even recognizing it. I think is a pretty powerful statement for Truckstop to make. That's pretty cool. I mean, and when it comes to serving those customers, I mean, are you like what? I guess overall with kind of helping, like how do you support, like as the industry seems to be consolidating, like what are you trying to do to support those independent carriers, in an industry that's trying to consolidate? What advice would you give to the new owner operator who's trying to like come in and make it happen? You know, is there something you guys are doing to maintain transparency, fairness throughout this
Yeah.
process? I know that's kind of broad. It's multi
Yeah. Yeah.
questions, but
No, this is an awesome conversation because um I love like in my role. I didn't mention this, but I graduated with a degree in philosophy, and when I first met my wife, she was like, "Uh-oh, what the hell is this guy? This guy's not going to have any career. He graduated a career a degree in philosophy." But I love like just looking at things from the core principles of reality. And what I find really interesting about trucking, and where when I get really excited, is when I meet someone that's doing something kind of unique, right? They're doing something and they're doing it intentionally. Maybe they didn't get there intentionally. Maybe they sort of like lucked into it, or I don't know that I believe in luck as much as maybe others. They were doing something. They were working hard, and they were fortunate to get an opportunity. They saw the opportunity, and they took that, and they sort of made their path. But what's most interesting when I think about owner operators, and we were actually talking to this new owner operator. I'll talk a little bit about Truckstop here too, in this story. But we're talking to an owner operator, and here's what was really interesting, Michael. He had been a Class A driver, I want to say for 8 years. I might be wrong. It might be like 6, but somewhere in that 5 year range. So he had been a driver for a while. One of the things that's hard in this industry is that you can drive for another company, and you could be a great driver for that company, and that probably might give you confidence to say I can go out and be on my own. But what's hard is that when you go out and be on your own, brokerages often don't want to work with you to start, right? And maybe if you have a shipper that knows you well, and that you've worked with a receiver a bunch of times, and you dropped off at that location a bunch when you were a company driver, they might say, hey, when you go out on your own, call us up and we'll work with you. And that's fantastic, but that's probably not enough freight for you to make a business out of it, right? And so you need to get other freight too, right? And it's hard to get there when you're a new authority. And one of the things that's really hard in this market right now, if you're a new authority, and really, quite frankly, anyone, is that there's more capacity than there is freight, right? There's just not, the demand is softer than it's been. We're still a little bit probably over supplied on the truck side, and so stuff leaves the boards really fast, right? Like the good stuff is out. It's a who can touch there first, and who can give. It's a challenging market, right? And what ends up happening for these new authorities a lot of times is they go on the boards, and they'll call freight. They'll call on a piece of freight, and they'll say, hey, like this looks like great. This is exactly where I'm going. Can you tell me about the load? And the load sounds great. Turns out they don't have the authority to carry the freight, because a lot of brokers have raised the authority requirement, particularly as fraud has risen in the industry. And so they just spent some anywhere between 5 and 15 minutes on the phone on one load, right? And they potentially lost a bunch of other freight that they could have won. So we were talking to this guy, and he was telling us that he was working with on a couple other boards, and he literally could not get freight for 2 weeks. His first 2 weeks as an owner operator, he couldn't get a piece of freight. No one would give him anything. And he came over to Truckstop, and we just recently launched a really cool feature that enables you as a carrier to know what the authority requirement is for that piece of freight that's on the board. So everyone loves the filter and sort by rate. Like, what's the rate on what's the rate on the load? That's everyone's favorite one, and that naturally, right? But now what we're seeing is like the second favorite for people is to go by rate and then filter or sort by authority tenure. Because what's really interesting, Michael, is that if you're a 3-month authority tenure, you can't go get the things that require 1 year or 2 years. If you're a 2-year authority tenure, why would you be competing on freight that 3-month carriers can haul, right? You're going to end up, everyone's going to be calling that freight, right? And so what you can end up doing is, if you're that brand new carrier, you can now go onto the load board and you can prioritize who you're going to call to basically what you can win, right? And he called us and he told us, look, guys, for 2 weeks, I couldn't pick up a single piece of freight on these other boards. I joined Truckstop. I've been rolling for 2 months straight now. No problems. Profitable, running power only, actually, which I think, generally speaking, doesn't have like the highest profitability reputation, but he's been doing great. And it's because of little features like that, right? Little features and functionality like that we only really can build those things because we stay as close as we possibly can to the carrier, and we understand the carrier's challenge. Now, there's another problem that I would love to solve. I'm not sure exactly how to solve it, but I'd love to solve the problem of that guy obviously is a very experienced trucker, right? He's been doing it for 5 years, probably has a very good reputation, wanted to do it on his own, and he's being treated like he's never done it before, right? By the brokerage community. And that's not into any fault of the brokerage community. The brokerage community just doesn't know, can't possibly look at his background in his past. So I don't know how we're going to figure it out, but if anyone has an idea and they want to reach out to me, I'd love for us to figure out how we can solve that problem of how do we make it easier for you to come in as a new authority, but be able to bring your priors with you, right? Your successful priors with you into the industry. There's a couple of things I'll talk about too, but yeah, I think that's a really cool thing that we've been able to do, and particularly help those new owner operators, but it actually also helps the tenured owner operators too.
And what's great about that is that power only guy can then build relationships with the people who are working with him. Yes. He can keep in touch with them and figure it out. And then as he goes to those places, that's where he can kind of keep cash flowing. And yeah, we were just talking about that on the show I did yesterday with Casey Larkin. And we were talking about the idea, because again, the reason why the brokerage community is reactive to the sense of fraud, which I would love to ask you about fraud in a little bit. Wanted to get to something else first, but they're reactive to fraud. This is kind of because they don't have any other way around it. There is no way they can see kind of somebody's driving history, but technology there, because you could have a guy who's been driving for 15 years and then he's saved up, or his kids are out of the house and he's like, well, my kids are gone, I'm going to sell my house. I've met a driver who did that. I was in CDL school with him. His kids were out of the house. And so he was like, I'm going to sell my house, get in a truck in and just travel the country, so to speak. And so it was like, you'll have a guy who's doing that, drives for 10, 15 years. He wants to get a truck. You've got a guy who's been trucking for 15 years. This guy's got 1.5 million miles, safe miles under his belt. And then all of a sudden he gets an authority, and you're not going to give him freight, but you'll give it to, you'll give it to somebody who's maybe been in business 2 years. And by all means, they only have 2 years of experience. So there's kind of like a resume paradox to the authority versus driver thing. I think a really challenge. I think technology will be what can solve that, whether it be through data, MVR collection, whatever you can do. But yeah, it's great to navigate. But to truck stops, instead of Truckstop just like falling asleep at the wheel, being like, oh, well, there's nothing we can do. So you're like, okay, you decided to say, well, what can we do? Instead of saying, well, it looks like there's nothing we can do, you pivot and said, well, what can we do in the interim, in between solving this problem? There's something we can do in the interim to help solve it now, which is really cool.
So you asked another question, Michael, which was like, what would you how would you think about starting a trucking business, or what would you tell someone that wants to start a trucking business? I mean, I would be honest with them. I would tell them that this is a tough market to start a trucking business in, but if you can make it now, you can make it in any market, right? And so it's a tough one to make it in, but it also is one that really shows your mettle. And what I've noticed, and I'm sure you have too, would love your thoughts on it. But what I've noticed is that the guys that I speak to that are like successful, and everyone needs to have their own definition of success. But when I say successful, I mean like long tenure, consistent income, the income that they want consistently. They're running the lanes that they want. They've got the lifestyle they want, right? Whatever that marker of success for you is. The guys that I talk to, they love the lifestyle of the road, but they treat it like a business, right? And importantly, they treat everyone that they haul freight for like their customer. And I think that I know my friend Brent Hutto, and that's one of the things that he and I always talk about. It's like the customer orientation is almost always what I've seen separates the really consistent, successful trucking company from the guy or gal that comes in the industry, it kind of struggles to get traction, struggles to find what kind of stability and treating it like a business there's some really simple stuff. Like, how do you show up? How do you show up to the receiver? When you show up to the receiver, are you like in a good mood? Are you kind and personable? Because guess what? That person could give you freight in the future. Maybe not now, but if you show up to them enough and you've got a good attitude, and you say, and a couple times you show up to them, you say, hey, I've been here a couple times, and like I really like working with you guys. If you guys ever have any freight, I'd love to be considered for it. Like, I love this lane. I run this lane all the time. You guys, if you ever need anything from me, I'd love to be a guy that comes to you and helps you out, right? And so you've got to be able to kind of put yourself out there, and every business requires sales. There's no different in freight, right? I think that's one thing I've seen that separates people. The other thing I've seen that separates people is they really focus on a niche. A niche is just basically like, this is the type of commodity that I haul. This is the lane that I run. Like, I am the master of this lane. I met a guy. He literally he could tell you when the grade changed on his lanes, and like he had the mapping of the grading on his lanes changed. He knew exactly when he was hitting the brake. He knew exactly when he was getting off the pedal. He knew exactly when to time the pedal so he could optimize his cost per mile, his miles per gallon. I mean, the dude was dialed on all that stuff. And not everyone's going to be that way. Not everyone's mathematically sort of gifted in that way. But at the same time, he was so consistent on his lanes that they were like children to him. He knew everything about them. He knew when the gas prices changed by 10 cents on that lane one day. He knew when the new construction was happening and where the traffic was going to be, and when to get out and when to not get out, right? And that all helps your operation. It helps your cadence as a business, and you can get into these niches. I ran into a great owner operator at Matt's, and he was telling me that, like, because we keep hearing from everybody, right? It's a really hard market. It's a tough market. Lots of business failure. Lots of people leaving the market because it's tough to find freight. But he found a single lane, and he's running open deck, and he just he's building a good reputation for himself. He's helping build a hospital here. Now those guys are building another hospital over there, and now they want him to haul for that, right? And so he's building his business in a very sort of business person like way. And I think that's sometimes forgotten because trucking is such a lifestyle. Has that lifestyle culture that you've mentioned. You got to really remember that it is a business, and you got to treat your customers like any business would treat their customers, and you got to approach things with a sales mindset, right? I'm sure, like any book you're going to read about business, they're going to talk about sales a lot. If you can't master sales, it's going to be tough to build a decent business.
Yeah, I've said that probably 1,000 times on this show. Like, you could be the greatest plumber in the world,
yeah,
but if you can't, like, if you go over somebody's house and you're I don't want to say socially awkward. Like, I don't want to say anything like that's insulting, but like, you can't, if you're not like somewhat of a people person. It's one thing if you're soft spoken or anything, but you could be the best plumber in the world. But how are you still have to sell your plumbing services. Like, you still have to,
totally.
Because it's still highly competitive. People are looking for cheaper options. But like, no matter what, you could be an HVAC company, but you still have to do it. I think that's probably the best piece of advice that's been a hot topic lately, is realizing, because it's in the trucking world, on the trucker side of things, and some stuff that you might not know about is that there's just like there's a lot of similarities in the fitness industry. There's a lot of grifters. There's a lot of people who have risen, snake oil salesmen who have large
Yes.
social media accounts who sell the dream of trucking being this type of passive income, this get rich quick. You can do. I mean, there are people on social media who like quite literally like will make videos saying make money in trucking without a CDL, and will tell you and will sell you a course on exactly how to do it. And it's like, does it miss the? Again, you don't see that type of stuff in the tech world. You don't see that type of stuff in other industries. I think a lot of that has to do with certain regulation. Perhaps the barrier to entry is a little too low in the authority range, and that's a whole different conversation. But people will sell that, and I think there are certain carriers who market the idea of becoming an owner operator as a way to get a bigger paycheck as opposed to starting a business. They'll say, hey, you're an independent contractor, you're this, but people look at going the owner. A lot of drivers, and this is just from reading comments on TikTok, reading comments on Instagram, people always talk about making the jump to owner operator. They're like, I want to make the jump, and they're talking about making the jump as if it's a promotion, like as if it's, and they're doing this when you are, in fact, it'd be no different than you opening up an outdoor store. It's no different than you opening up a plumbing company. Like, you're not making a jump. You are getting, you are getting into business, and there's no way around that. And it's like, we could owner operators, do they have a little bit more freedom and autonomy than a company guy? For debate. As a company guy, man, I had weddings I was able to get routes to, like at the company I was a company driver for, that they awesome. You wanted to go anywhere to do a reset, they would try to do everything they could. But as an owner operator, you might have freedom to essentially maybe go home when you want, and you're the one booking the freight, but you don't have the freedom. Like, you don't pick the market. You don't pick, like, I was hauling loads sometimes that would get me from Arizona. Like, there was cheaper freight that I was hauling because it was just to keep, the company had about 30 trucks ish or so. So it's like, there is sometimes cheap freight I'm hauling, but as an owner operator, you're not going to take that lane if it's, if it's not paying well. So you're kind of, you have to follow the market. You've got to know those people. And then again, as you said, like showing up to receivers, building those relationships, like treating everything you do. Because as a company driver, it's just like, hey, you're a representative of the company, do a good job. That's it. But then as an owner operator, it's now, hey, everybody's a potential customer, and you have to be viewing it that way. And if you're not viewing it that way, then again, I don't think you're doomed, but it'll be a big learning process.
Yeah. And I think, like, the customer comment is almost, when I first at Truckstop, we have the benefit of being able to see both sides of the market, right? The brokerage side of the market, the trucking side of the market. And one thing I was really taken aback by after when I first sort of came into the industry and like walked into the pool, if you will, was when I would go to a trucking conference, they would talk about brokers and they would talk about loads, but they rarely ever said the word customer. Even when it was a shipper, they almost never said customer. They said like contract freight. They didn't call it a customer. They called it a contract freight, or dedicated freight or whatever. And then when I would go to broker conferences, and they would say customer. It's all about the customer, right? All that matters is getting freight for them, right? And then then they would say carrier. It's all about my carrier network. It's all about my carrier. It's all about my carrier, right? So the broker had to have both of those sides, but at least one of the sides was a customer for them, right? And the really good brokers, I think about, both as basically customers. They might call the carrier more of a provider, right? Someone that provides a service to them, a service provider, but nonetheless, they have to treat them like a customer because they're trying to make them happy too. And so I say that because I think a lot of times, to your point, you got to go where the market's going, right? And picking up the phone, calling a broker, having a negotiation with them, and treating that negotiation as hostile, or treating that negotiation as an opportunity to sort of teach someone about a market, probably isn't the best way to do business ultimately, if you ever hope to work with a company like that again. And so better said is like, know that everyone's negotiating. Like everyone's margin is sort of at this tension of negotiation, and be okay with that, right? Be okay. If you're not okay with negotiating, you should not be an owner operator. If you're not okay with having a hard conversation about a piece of freight and what the rate should be, and then walking away and not being like livid about it, and to your point, not being able to compartmentalize that. Okay, going to close the door on that, close the cupboard on that drawer on that piece of freight, and let's open this one up and let's see if I can get this one instead, right? And be able to compartmentalize that conversation, move on to the next one. Don't hold any grudge, and just say, hey, you know what? This is what I'm worth, and I know what I need to move my freight for. And if you can't do it, it is what it is, right? And be able to move on. That's a skill, I think, that also over time can be learned. I think what's interesting, though, I sort of say this out of both sides of my mouth, because what's interesting, though, is like all these AI dispatching tools that are coming out may actually support. Nice. I love that. All these AI dispatching tools may actually support people in some of the things that they feel least comfortable with, right? Negotiating, having those conversations, and it may turn this into a little bit more of like a lower friction business on the owner operator side. But I still think you're going to have to be able to manage people, work with relationships, and that's where you're going to be most successful.
For sure. I know we're running a little bit on time, so I just had 2 questions left for you, and
Yeah.
they can be a little bit rapid fire, because it's great. Truck stops everywhere. You guys, you're at brokerage conferences, you're at Mid-America Truck Show. You've been pretty trying to get very omnipresent. Seems like wherever truck parking club's going, you guys have been in there, and you guys have a phenomenal team who's been doing some really great work. But you seem to be very, very bullish on the idea of brokers and carriers building relationships. And so, like, last 2 questions really are, is Truckstop kind of involved in helping foster that broker carrier relationship of viewing it as customers? Like, are you guys kind of getting involved with, because you seem to be involved, you've said at the top of the show, you're a driver focused company, which is great. I mean, the industry, nothing in this industry runs without the trucks. Like, it's period. Like, no company exists with, like, Truckstop. There's no reason for it if there's no trucks.
Yep.
But there's a lot of animosity between brokers and carriers, especially lately with the rise of fraud, with the
Yep.
volatility of the market. Kind of how have you guys been involved with being able to foster those relationships? Is there any sort of technology innovation that you've kind of brought together to make it easier for brokers and carriers to get together? And then kind of closing out, what are the trends you're seeing in the market now that people can be, what are ways owner operators and drivers can get ready to, because there's a lot of, there's stuff with tariffs going on. There's a lot of up and down and stuff. So, I mean, basically broker carrier relationships, are you guys involved? And then, close out with how owner operators and independent drivers can really stay on the forefront of, the rest, especially the rest of 2025.
Yeah. Both wonderful topics. So I think as we look at the future for Truckstop and for how we can support carriers, how we can support brokerages, I think today what will ultimately be the winning strategy here is a strategy around greater transparency. I say that in a different way than like rate transparency. That's a whole other ball game. That's probably off to the side. Let's leave that for a second, right? More about the ability to quickly evaluate and understand whether you want to work with that company and whether you want to work on that piece of freight, right? As a carrier, so much time is lost and so much frustration is created, our customers tell us, by calling on freight that they're never going to be able to take, calling on freight that they would have been able to qualify out very quickly because it didn't fit what they need. It wasn't the quantity. They don't want to do a washout, whatever it may be. There's any number of reasons why they don't want to take a piece of freight. And so what we want to do is we want to help relationships grow when trust grows. And what we're told is that we have the highest quality trucks in our network, the lowest amount of fraudulent carriers in our network. That's just what we're told, right? I don't know. I can't speak for the other networks, but I can tell you what our customers tell us frequently. And what we can do then is what we're really working toward is how do we ensure that our carriers are seeing the highest quality loads? Now, quality for freight is always going to be different for everyone. Some people are going to say the highest quality loads are the highest rate loads. Guess what? Oftentimes it's the highest fraudulent loads too, the ones that have the highest rate, right? And so highest rate does not equal high quality all the time, right? And also, Michael, you may want to go to Phoenix to get to a wedding, right? But the highest paying load goes to Chicago. And so for you in that moment in time, the highest quality load is not that highest rate load, right? And it may also be going to a receiver that you don't want to work with because you've been to that receiver before and you had to sit there 6 hours and you didn't get paid attention or whatever it may be, right? And so I think as we continue to improve our network and improve the visibility into the pieces of the network, that's where relationships actually can flourish, because a lot of the pinch points in relationship are around, oh, you like hid the ball from me. Oh, why didn't you just tell me that before? Why are you telling me now? Right? You could have told me that before and I would have been fine with it, but now it's a surprise, and like no one wants to be surprised when they're operating a business, right? And so I think that's one way that we're going to continue to improve on relationship. I think but I will say, caveat, there will always be tension between brokers and carriers, because the broker, to the carrier's mind, sits in between them and the customer. And they do that because brokers are really good at sales. And it's hard to get really good at sales when you're driving a truck all the time. It's hard to make phone calls to shippers because you're driving a truck all the time, right? And brokers also solve a very particular problem for shippers, which is they sort of like disintermediate some risk. They take some risk off of a shipper's plate and they put it on themselves. And then there's the operational aspect of like just making sure execution happens, making sure the load actually gets transported where it goes from point A to point B. The shippers like that, right? So brokers are going to be around. That's not going away. In fact, it probably only gets bigger from here, right? More loads go through brokerages probably in the future, even than they do today. I would sort of prognosticate. I think the carrier side, right? Like the key there is be okay with the tension, understand that there's going to be tension, find the brokers you really love to work with, and then when you need to fill in through a load board, make sure you're on a load board that has the freight that's easiest for you to find, easiest for you to win, and has the clearest amount of quality in it, right? So I'd say that on tariffs, man, we're up, we're down, we're on a pause. We love each other, we hate each other. United Kingdom's going to buy a lot of beef from us or something like that, right? Like no one really knows where this is going. What I will say is, like in our survey that we most recently did, which I found really interesting, in Q1, 65% of our carriers are basically bullish that the market's going to get better for them. And that typically means like volumes are going to go up and therefore rates will also go up, right? So there's going to be more freight for everybody, and the freight for everybody is equal to more rates or higher rates. And, I think that what's interesting about that is there's a little bit of a catch-22 in that. If carriers stay optimistic, which optimism increased by like 12 or 15% from the previous quarter. If carriers stay optimistic, what that might mean actually is that rates sort of drag along the bottom or drag along where they are today for longer, because capacity stays in market that maybe shouldn't be in market. And until we really see an uptick in demand, we're just not going to see meaningful changes in rates, because capacity is just not changing at the rate that we need it to change right now, given where demand is. And I think you'll probably, my guess, if I had to guess, I'd guess there's going to be some pull forwards in the next 90 days. Once they kind of burn through the inventory that they brought in pre-April 2nd. And I don't know when the 90 days ends, but, call it August, probably some period of time in August. There's going to probably be some pull forwards in the summer, because Black Friday is coming up after August. It's like those things happen quick, right? And so there will be pull forwards, and we'll probably see a better summer as a result of that. And so my guess is that a lot of carriers are probably looking at that and saying, "Oh, it's going to be a good summer. I gotta be ready for that." And that'll probably give some people some money to live off of and kind of run off of for some period of time. As I think there will actually probably see capacity like stay sort of where it's at, unless we see a cyclical demand change, which I don't know. I don't see a lot of indicators that will show me that there's a cyclical demand change here happening. I think we're probably going to be in a similar spot to where we are today.
No, it's good. That makes sense. Hey, I know you got a hard stop, but I wanted to, number one, thank you for coming on. I'd love to bring you back on to talk, just have more conversations about this, and even maybe, we can bring on, I'd love to have on an owner operator who wouldn't mind coming on talking
Oh
about
man, that'd be awesome.
some of their experience with Truckstop, but getting a little roundtable action. I'd love to.
Totally.
I'd definitely love to keep in touch, because I think this conversation can go on for a while. But yeah, any last words? Where can the people find you? How can they use Truckstop before you sign off?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not as active as I should be on social media. I love how active you are, and so I don't really have like handles you can catch me at. If you're on LinkedIn as an owner operator, hit me up on LinkedIn. I love seeing what you guys post there. I'm noticing more and more owner operators getting involved in LinkedIn, which I think is really cool, because we learn a ton from what you guys post there. We're also obviously looking at the Facebook groups and everything like that. But if you find me on LinkedIn, please look me up. I'd love to connect. And otherwise, super pumped to make this connection, Michael. And I love the I love the mission of both freight and fitness. And I think that's so important in this industry. And however I can help you, please let me know. And whenever you want to get a fun run going at any of these conferences that we can put together and get some truckers out there to do a walk or run with us, then I think that's awesome. I'd love to be involved.
All right, yeah. Check your DMs in a little bit. I'm going to drop you one on LinkedIn here in a little bit. We're going to collab on something.
Sweet, man. All right, appreciate you.
Hey, man, appreciate you. Take care. Well, that'll do it for episode 153 of the Lumbar Trucking Show. Awesome conversation right there. I don't think enough good things can be said about Truckstop, like I said at the top of the show, with just the recent years, at least from my point of view. Other people may have, differentiating opinions, which are welcome, but that's what I've been seeing from their marketing. From just the fact that I was reached out to have, Sean come on the show as a guest. Clearly, this is where their minds are at. They're driver focused. He said before he signed off, if you're an owner operator, to drop in his DMs, talk to him. He didn't say if you're a broker. He didn't say if you're a shipper. They seem to be very focused on wanting owner operators to succeed, because if owner operators, if truck drivers are winning, that means Truckstop is winning, which all falls in line with the overall philosophy of kind of how I like to do things, and about how I think it's the best way to, it's the only way to win. The only way to win is by helping others win selflessly. That pay it forward model, but also helping others win without expecting it in return is really where it's at. I was just at a run this morning. We were talking about that, like different parts of the country. I was doing some Midwest respecting this morning, because somebody who was at the run club is originally from Wisconsin, and I got fired up, and I was started telling all the good things about the Midwest, and about how the American dream lives there, and about how Midwest hospitality is so much, is like it's the most genuine. It's the most genuine. Like, people there will, open their door, cook you food. They'll do anything they'll lend you the shirt off your back, and they don't want anything in return, so to speak. And when you give that, and that's how the community is. I was just on a podcast yesterday talking about, a lot of the big, some of the motivators that have helped me along throughout my journey. And that's kind of what the Austin fitness community is here. It's this community of people with kind of common goals of what they're trying to do, whether it be, physically or professionally. And people are always just willing to help without the expectation of something in return. And how that makes people feel on both sides has everybody walking away feeling more fulfilled, feeling like they have a purpose. And I think that just in life, when if you don't have a purpose and a mission, there's no direction on where you're going, then that's where we get lost. I mean, I talked about this in my Substack, talking about veterans' mental health, especially for OEF, OAF. And when you don't have the mission, when you don't have the purpose or a direction moving forward, that's why we've run into this mental health crisis in the veteran community. I think that's why we have a mental health crisis, not just in the veteran community, but in the trucking community and in, coast to coast. This is a nationwide issue when we talk about mental health, of all these, cases skyrocketing, and, the medications people have to be on, always talking about going to seek therapy. And when we think about historically, sure, did therapy exist probably like a couple thousand years ago? Sure. You had Socrates, you had philosophers and the Stoics who were presenting their knowledge to people that would help. But really, it was all tribal. It was all communal. And when you think about, if you go back 1,000, 1,500 years, you go back 6,000 years, like, we're talking maybe even pre-Abraham times, how communities, how tribes navigated tough times. Couldn't do it by yourself. You can't do it by yourself. It was impossible. If you were a lone wolf, if you went off on your own, if you were a drifter, you died. Either the weather took you out, starvation, or something killed you. Like, that's it. If you tried to go it alone, that's it. You're done. And so this idea of being able to sustain now in the modern age, in the 21st century, without it, by doing it on your own, taking everything on with no purpose, no direction, no mission, you're going to wind up the same way the drifter did, 10,000 years ago, who didn't stick with the tribe, who didn't buy in, where they were suffering through a brutal winter or going through a drought and weathering that storm together. So a lot to be said behind it. Really absolutely enjoyed this conversation. Again, a lot more great guests to come. I've been talking to a lot of drivers recently who are interested in telling their stories. We did we just said it at the end of the show. There's a lot of ups and downs. There's uncertainty. We're going to see a big surge with this 90-day tariff thing. So we're going to see a bump. Is summer good? What I think is really interesting is the fact that, they did a survey, 65% of carriers are bullish. They're optimistic. That, I like that. That's a good mental, white pill, I think, for all of us to swallow. Glass half full. That's how we should always be looking at things. That optimism apparently seemingly coming with a somewhat cost, because capacity that's not needed is still hanging around. And that's not offensive to anybody. I'm not trying to offend anybody who's owning a business and is out there, trying to grind and survive right now. But it's just economics of scale at work. The optimism might mean that they're going to hang on and try to dig in and weather the storm. But it's also a testament to, taking a step back, realizing where you are. Again, I talked about it when I came off the road. I didn't look at coming off the road as a failure. It was a pivot into what I'm doing as an individual, as a brand, as a person, as a human being. I just saw a video on TikTok recently of a gentleman who, he was leased on. He owned a truck. He was leased on with a carrier, and he made a tough video where he was audibly in tears over having to turn in his truck, he was going to sell his truck and go back to being a company driver. And he was absolutely beat up over it. And he kind of listed his accolades. I mean, he would go out, he grinded, he was said in the video, I would go out for 6-7 weeks. Like, this guy was a workhorse out there. And he talked about what had led up to it. And, it just dried up for him. He's having to sell his truck, but unfortunately to keep afloat, he put himself into some debt. He's gone through some tough times, and he's going back to be working as a company driver, but he was hit by it. And this is me just speaking out into the ethos, into the universe, that if you are going through it, if there is something, if you've got to, I think Alex Hormozy has said this when it comes to, either bankruptcy or just, or going out of business or what have you. Like, people look at, you don't fail as long as you don't stop. Like, if you just stop, then you've failed. But one of the best decisions you can make. I mean, we talk about we look at even the president of the United States. We look at other people who have succeeded in business. You read any of these books, you look at the failed businesses that they had kind of along the way that they've had. They've had certain failures, but then all of a sudden they've amounted to success. Like, everybody you read about, athletes, guys who've had injuries, other successful business owners, they've all experienced, like, failure is without a doubt. And this is almost like, this is ingrained in my algorithm. So I feel like it's something people know, but I think it still needs to be said, is that failure is 100% a part of the process. And that might mean selling, pivoting, figuring it out, doing some more things, meeting more people, building relationships, finding a mission, finding a direction, and seeing what's the best fit for you. To drag yourself through the glass and mud and continue to dive yourself deeper into debt and digging a deeper hole might not be the best move. For some people it worked. I credit guys like Andy Frisella and what he's done at First Form, from sleeping on the mattress in his supplement store. His business for years made like they would net, they would profit like $650 a month in his superstores. Like, that's it. Like, he, really skimming off the top Spartan lifestyle. And now it's turned into, this, the large health and supplement company that it's become today. And, there's stories like that for sure, but few and far between. I think who you are, it dictates, who you are, your current life scenario, your setting, your family, all that stuff. Because first and foremost, your responsibility has got to be to, you got to put God on top, and then you have to serve what's best for your family. And then it goes down, and then it kind of trickles down. So it's kind of evaluating where you're at the time. This is just speaking frankly, speaking generally to the entire situation. Getting off the road and pivoting, it did nothing but set me up for success. You have to look at it in the long time of a career, similar to finance, similar to your fitness goals, similar to your financial goals. Like, when you work with a financial advisor, or when you start wanting to lose weight, you've got to take accountability of how many calories you're consuming, what goes in, what goes out. Same thing with getting your finances set up. You need to see, how much do I make? How much do I spend? And then where you can save, where you're allocating money. And that's how you kind of have to look at your career. When you look at your career, when you look at getting your CDL, as a step in your career and what you do in it. I mean, because if you think about any other company, say you work for, whatever, another company, and you talk about getting promoted, some people are okay with doing the same job they start and finish with. Even though my grandfather was an owner, he drove for 30 years. His full-time job as an owner at Lombard was driver. And there's plenty of people who do that. That's perfectly fine. When you think about most people in a career, like developing and kind of moving up and onwards in other parts of where you can best serve the industry is also just as important. So maybe that guy did go broke driving his truck, but I'll tell you what, he's probably knows a bunch of people and has enough knowledge about the industry to where he can walk into, and drivers need to know this especially, you can walk into any other business, any other link in the chain, and you have something to offer way more than anybody else. Like way more than anybody else. I was talking to another driver about this. Big shout out to my guy Nathan. I'm about to give him a call after this. He views like over the road trucking, like not just local guys, and I kind of agree with him on this. He views having over the road experience in general as like being in the military and having a combat deployment. Like at least for the time, obviously those things are slowing down, but for the most part, for almost an entire generation, being in Iraq and Afghanistan for 20 plus years. Like if you served in the military during those times, like to not have deployed is like, you might be a staff NCO or an officer, but if you didn't have a deployment, there was a look you got. I mean, when I got to my unit in the Marine Corps, that's you were treated differently because you didn't go to Iraq with the team that went on that deployment. Like there's an aspect to it. And so having that over the road experience where it can take you in a career throughout the industry is, I think, again, you can't think small, you can't think narrow with whatever you're doing. Open yourselves up. Again, are the most crucial and the most important people in this industry the people behind the wheel? Absolutely. Without a doubt in my mind, they are. I've said it plenty of times before. They are serving the country in every way possible. And how that they're physically, literally moving the industry. The most important link in the chain is the driver who's behind the wheel of the car. And I think people need to not forget that. But again, who better than to be calling the shots, to be decision makers and leaders in this industry than people who have been behind the wheel? That's why we want guys like Lee Schmidt to be the head of FMCSA. That's why we want guys like Gord McGill doing what he's doing in advocacy, writing a book, going on shows, speaking to Tucker Carlson, going on the news. That's why we need guys like Shannon Everett and the ATU guys to do what they're doing because they know the job. That's why we need these people to be in these positions and moving forward and moving ahead because they're the ones who can do it. Again, I talked about this on Gord's show recently. A lot of times drivers view like getting out of the truck as almost a sort of betrayal. And it's anything but. Again, people are free to live their lives, and they need to live their lives as they see fit and what's going to help God, family, and then them in that order. And to stick with something that might not be working in that season of life isn't for everybody at that time. But we can't fault the people who aren't behind the wheel anymore, who are still trying to do what's right by drivers in the industry, especially. We can't view that because our enemies, the people who are working against us, the people who are rooting for our downfall, the people who are not the bad players, the bad guys in this story that we're writing of transportation, they're all people. And, we're talking government, other organizations and beyond. They are people who are able to be present and be in the arenas where certain decisions are made. And I think we need to remember and realize that. So we need people who are going to be in those arenas to fight the good fight for what is best for the driver, the most important person in the industry. But again, that'll do it for episode 153. Thank you guys once again for tuning in. We will be back next week. More guests, more conversations, more problem solving, more talking fitness, more culture, everything under the sun. If you, again, want to come on the show, you're a driver, you're a link in the supply chain, feel free to drop me a line. You can email me at mike@lombardtrucking.com. We'd love to hear from you, your story, how you've gotten into the industry, and what you're doing to play your part. But other than that, guys, we're going back to the bench.